Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your special Labor Day edition of this, the History Video Series. I am sitting here in the desk and enjoying the afternoon. I hope you're up to some great stuff. Played some Nintendo earlier on, went outside, played some soccer, some baseball. We're going to jump in the pool in a little while, and I thought I'd take 10 minutes here and bring us up to date a little bit on what we're reviewing in class. So starting at the top of the third page of the study guide, let's talk about colonial rebellions and groups getting upset. We're going to begin with Bacon's Rebellion, 1676, the Jamestown colony. Now, we also know that as Virginia, the Chesapeake, the Tidewater, all of those things. That's where the problems are going to begin. Nathaniel Bacon is not a poor man. Unlike most of the men who flock to his side, Bacon does come from quite a good economic background, and he's invited over to the Jamestown colony by his cousin, Governor William Berkeley. And when he arrives, he ends up leading men against Berkeley. Not very family-like. Hey, why don't you come over and have a good time? Okay, then we'll try and overthrow you. It'll be a real good time. Yeah. Okay. So over comes Bacon. Here's what Bacon is upset about. Bacon soon begins to realize that there's a few major issues here. Number one, Berkeley, he feels, is corrupt. That Berkeley is handing out land to all of his best friends, and these are the best pieces of land. That is to say, they're settled. They don't have an Indian issue. That if you can get land, it's in the far western part of the colony or the northern part of the colony where Indian presence is still pretty large. And that leads us to another issue here. Bacon believes that the colony should be expanding much more quickly, that there are so many free men roaming around without the opportunity to get land because the colony will not go to war against Native Americans in order to win that land, that they are dragging their heels, and that people like Berkeley and his buddies don't care because, frankly, they have land, and they're not worried that other people don't have land. And so the expansion into the West isn't something that they're chiefly worried about. Berkeley is going to counter by saying, wait a second, expansion is expensive. Is Bacon volunteering to pay for all of the taxes that we'll need to supply the militias and then build the forts to keep areas defended? Do we really need this land? The tobacco crop by the 1670s has sort of flattened out. Tobacco is still a valuable commodity, but it is no longer the boom crop that it was in the 1640s and 50s. You can make money on tobacco, but you can't make ludicrous money on tobacco. So again, Bacon would tell you, oh, Berkeley, you're trying to corner the trade because you have tobacco, and you're trying to be the one who can sell it, and you don't want anyone else to flood the market. Whew. A lot of things going on here, right? And of course, there's the Native American perspective, which probably says, why don't you all get back on your boats and have a nice day? Go back across the ocean. What does Bacon do? Bacon wants a military commission from his cousin, William Berkeley, the governor, to go to war. Berkeley's not going to give it to him. That's Berkeley's complete call. He's the governor. He has those kinds of royally appointed powers. If I don't want to go to war against him, we're not going. Is there a colonial legislature, the House of Burgesses, that has the right to tell me that we should? Yeah, to tell me that we should, not to veto me. I am a royally appointed governor. That means I have the kind of power to say we're not going to war. There it is. Okay? When Berkeley won't give Bacon that commission for war, Bacon decides, well, let's go to war anyway. And he attacks Native Americans, thus setting off a huge furor within the colony. Berkeley's obviously upset with Bacon. This leads Bacon to end up invading Jamestown, burning it down. Okay? Berkeley, by the way, scuttles across the harbor into the other side to try and wait it out. Bacon dies of dysentery, and a number of his men are also killed for their role in the rebellion. What changes? In the short run, a few things. Men who had lost their voting rights are restored to those voting rights. Berkeley is recalled to London and fired, so those corruption charges actually stuck. But the long-term causes are bigger here. Number one, this is the end, really, of the indentured servitude system as the dominant force of labor. African slavery was considered to be more effective and also less argumentative, and therefore it's going to win out. And number two, related to that point, the elites of the Virginia colony realize that rebellion from African slaves is an issue as well. And if they're going to have the support of lower-class whites within the colony, like Bacon's men, they're going to have to appeal to them on a racial and color sense, not in an economic sense. So in other words, they're going to pass laws that disenfranchise and remove the rights of Africans living within the colony in order to assure the equality and the power of whites, regardless of their economic background, therefore creating a hierarchy not based on economics, but based on color. And that assures that we can have those people's support when we need it. Number 2, Metacom's rebellion. Now, this happens at the same time. They're not related. They're not tied to each other. But at the same point in the New England colonies, a individual who the English call King Philip, so this is sometimes called King Philip's War, but the Native Americans call Metacom, is organizing Native Americans to try and rebel against the English to send them back home. Although Popey's revolt hasn't happened yet, that happens in 1680, we studied it already. So I think we can compare those two guys. Popey and Metacom both are fighting what they see as a last-ditch effort at civilization. If we don't fight now, disease and white encroachment upon our land and an overall push is just going to take us out of the society and there will be nothing left of us. So we either fight now and we make a point, or we can't. Okay? The war is pretty effective. It kills about it burns down about 1/5 of the homes in Rhode Island and part of New England, and it kills about 5% of the settlers in New England. Now, that's not a huge number, but it is a pretty successful rebellion. Unfortunately for Metacom, it falls short, and he kind of gets mowed under the side. The last event are the Salem witch trials of 1692. In a hyper-religious organization like the Puritan colony, you have to imagine that once in a while, when we have trouble, we look for our answers at what we see life as being explained with. In other words, if religion is, for us, all of life, then when we have problems, we're going to look there to explain how those problems took place and how we can maybe eliminate those problems. The Salem witch trials of 1692 are historically blamed on a number of things. Indian raids, unexplainable events, a lack of religious fervor among the settlers. Some people even say that it's an attempt by the males of the colony to sort of reinstitute an older sense of how women view themselves, that the women of the colony were getting too comfortable, that they were getting too familiar, if you like, and they needed to be reminded that they were women, and that meant a secondary role within the society. All of these individuals would not have necessarily agreed with those things, but those are some of the dominant theories of the day, and as the accusations begin to fly, it really snowballs out of control and eventually leads to the death of dozens of people. Unfortunately, the colony, I think, realizes very quickly that they'd gone out of control there. Flipping over the page, the next thing is a chart, which asks us about some new colonies. So let's talk about them. North Carolina is in North Carolina. Absolutely. Motives. North Carolina is supposed to be a colony that's a crown colony. It's founded by Charles II when he's restored to the throne in England after the Cromwell times of the 1660s, or the 1650s, I beg your pardon. Motives. It's supposed to be for poor settlers from Virginia who can't afford land. Basically, this is supposed to be kind of a Virginia for the poor man. So North Carolina is almost right off the bat a lower economic strata's land, okay? South Carolina, very different. South Carolina is one of the distinctive colonies, so we're going to spend a moment here. South Carolina is again founded at the same time by Charles II. It's in the Carolinas, but it is founded by people who had run Barbados sugar plantations, man, and they're coming to America, man. And they're coming into America in order to open rice plantations in the kind of swampy, marshy, ocean-sidey areas of South Carolina, which would make for a wonderful crop of rice. Rice becomes a staple food for feeding not just white populations, but slave populations within the British Empire. Early problems. South Carolina is always going to have the largest discrepancy between white and black in the colony. There's always a larger number of blacks once slavery really sets in, and as a result of that, the South Carolina government and the South Carolina people are always rather itchy trigger fingers about racial issues. They tend to be the most sensitive, the ones that are most likely to almost fly off the handle the quickest. It's South Carolina that seems ready to go. They're going to have some of the most, invasive laws. Maybe that's the right phrase for it. Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania, again, is another distinctive colony, so let's spend a minute here. Pennsylvania is the brainchild of William Penn, an English Quaker, who believes, and this is a noble belief, folks, that human beings can live together and not fight each other, in spite of the fact that they may have different religious and different social views. That the Quakers can found in America a new world almost, a new colony that has as its goal financial gain, yes, but harmony among human beings who are different. That's Quaker thinking, that human beings can get along. They're pacifists, don't believe in fighting. So William Penn is here trying to set up a colony that has a very different way. Early problems. Not all of the early settlers believed in what Penn believed in. A lot of them refused to take on Quaker ways. There's particular problems with a lot of the Scotch-Irish settlers who move in and are much too fond of drinking on a Friday and a Saturday, and that upsets William Penn. And Penn had also set it aside that the Native Americans would be to be treated well. And a lot of the early settlers saw Western lands as being far too tempting to be left to Native Americans and their kind of nomadic lifestyles, and they wanted to go in and take those lands. So we're going to see some skirmishes between the western part of the colony and the elites who live in the eastern part of the colony, and that's really a sign of things to come. Let's see if we can finish out this page here. What was the purpose of the Navigation Acts, and give an example of them? The Navigation Acts were a British attempt to enforce mercantilism, to assure that British goods remained within the British system of the Americas and that British citizens bought British goods. So it controlled the movement of resources across the Atlantic, part of the South Atlantic trade system really, and made sure that you were buying British goods when you could. It assured that you weren't going to buy French goods, and if you did, you paid a high tariff for doing so. What's an example? The Molasses Act, the Hat Act. Now, here's the key. Early on, the British are not really serious about these mercantile policies. At least the Americans don't think they are. They certainly don't seem to enforce them often enough. Smuggling is rife. So when the British really start to enforce them after the French and Indian War, the Americans are going to be like, rules? What do you mean rules? Rules you're going to follow? Good one, good one. The Dominion of New England, last one we'll cover here. The Dominion of New England is an attempt by James II, who takes to the throne of England in 1685, to gather together the New England colonies under one leadership. This is an early example of the fact that the colonies do not want to be together. They do not like to be joined up. They may well all have religious backgrounds. They may all well live, within a stone's throw of one another, but they don't want to be combined together. The purpose is to have one big crown colony that's administered by one group. The guy in charge of it is a military official named Governor Andros, and he had some interesting policies. Number one, he tried to make everyone into a member of the Church of England. Nice idea for a whole bunch of people who left the place initially for religious freedom. Go ahead and try and push that. On top of it, he tried to close down the New England town hall meetings that had become kind of a staple of early American democratic life within the New England colonies. Not so much. And he tried to tax the people. So you can kind of see how this one's going to go. Why and how did it end? In 1688, the English Parliament, fearing the rise of James II's newly born Catholic son to the throne one day, overthrew him and replaced him with William and Mary in what's called the Glorious Revolution. With James II also went Governor Andros. As soon as the colonies heard that James II was no longer in power, have a nice day, pal. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, okay? Describe the political ideals of John Locke. You know John Locke. John Locke! John Locke believes that we have the right to government, that if the government does not represent us, we not only have a right to remove it, we have a responsibility to remove it. That government derives not from above, but below. Why do I mention it here? Because Locke writes that in 1689 and 1690 in his second treatise on government. And as a result of that, people begin to think differently about the government. We're a long way from the revolution. We're generations away from it. But the seeds are being planted, my friends. Have a good night.